Hello and welcome. This topic is a simple one, and it's one I personally feel is extremely important for frontline sellers and for their sales managers. I'll be challenging some long-held beliefs, maybe even slaughtering a few sacred cows, and I encourage your questions and your feedback both during the live broadcast and after the broadcast. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Deb Calvert. I'm the author of the bestseller, Discover Questions, Get You Connected, and of the award-winning blog, Connect to Sell. Please be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Google+. My handle is there on screen, along with my email address. I conduct sales coaching, sales training, and sales research, as well as working in the leadership space. And those two disciplines converge in my current work, which you may know as the movement to stop selling and start leading. Like most of my work, it is based in research with buyers. Okay, for those who are new to Bright Talk, I'd like to point out two important features. First, be sure to notice the link called Attachments. That's, I believe, in the upper left corner of your screen. And I've included two resources there that are they're natural follow-ups to this topic, and I invite you to download those. And then secondly, you can subscribe to this channel. And if you do, you'll get more content each month from me if you'd like to. Bright Talk makes it really easy to stay on top of what's new and what's relevant for you. Now, enough of that commercial stuff. Let's get down to business. The Stop Selling and Start Leading movement is all about thinking like a leader. And it's about making behavioral choices that leaders make. Today, we're going to be talking about one distinction of leaders, and that is being strategic. You might ask, Deb, what do you mean by being strategic? Great question. It simply means whatever is pertaining to your strategy, which, of course, begs the question then, what is your strategy? In selling, what's your sales strategy? Do you have one, or are you focusing exclusively on the tactics, on the day-to-day actions, on pounding away every day to make more sales, to make your numbers? You know, the top sellers in any organization, in any industry, they have a guiding strategy. They're very strategic, and that strategy gives them clarity and focus. It helps them figure out where to allocate their time, where to put their greatest effort, and what things, most importantly, what things not to do, not to let become distractions that would take them off course. So if you don't have a strategy, I'm going to give you one that you can use. It's one that I've used. It's one I've coached hundreds of other sellers to use. It's one that I know with absolute certainty will make you more effective in selling. So here it is. It's simple and it's powerful. It's just this, the formula E equals O. Now I'm going to introduce this to you, and then I'll give you some examples, and I'll peel away the layers so we can explain this more fully. But the formula is E equals O. That's effort equals opportunity. I first heard this formula over 20 years ago from a colleague named Jen Wood, and I've been hearing it more recently, hearing it from a couple of my clients before I tell it to them. So I guess everything old is new again, but this is one of those laws of selling that never gets stale. E equals O, effort equals opportunity. That means that you put your discretionary effort where the opportunity is greatest. Now, what I'd like to do, I'd like to use this formula to answer 5 questions that I frequently hear from selling professionals. As I work with them in training and field coaching, these are some of the most common questions that I hear over and over again. And the answer is wrapped up in the application of this formula. So let's start right there. The first question, it's a good one. It's when should I stop calling on a prospect? When should I abandon the prospect? How much is too much? When am I beginning to be pushy? When is it no longer worth the time? And Maybe you've experienced this. Maybe you've been stuck, like so many salespeople feel stuck, just mired in the here and now with a clogged funnel, and a sense somehow that you've lost control. You've lost the ability to predict what's going to happen on the bottom of the funnel, when those prospects are going to emerge, because so many of them are clogging up the funnel. Now, of course, there are many, many different schools of thought about when to stop calling on a prospect. I'll ask you to calibrate everything I'm about to say with what the expectations are inside your own organization, but I also hope this will be food for thought. You know, some people say you never, ever quit calling on a prospect. And some will give you a number of calls. They'll prescribe to you a number of calls before you quit. By the way, and I'll come back to this, but usually that number is usually too low. If you're relying on the average number of calls it takes to land an appointment, your number is probably lower than the true average. When it comes to when to stop calling on a prospect, the other school of thought is that there should be a certain amount of time between calls. In fact, some give you formulas of first call and then wait till second call this long and third call is this much later. So many different ways to approach this, but here's my answer. When is it time to stop calling on a prospect? I say simply, effort equals opportunity. And that formula, E equals O, it applies when you're cold calling to make the initial contact. It applies when you're grappling with continuances to try to get that appointment or even the decision. It even applies with repeat business with your established customers. With all of those scenarios, you'll be asking yourself, how much effort should I expend? And the answer will be, how big is the opportunity? Those two things need to be equivalent. Now, let's say there's within a category of the buyers that you talk to, let's say that there is someone who is a leader in their field. They're bigger, they're thought to be better, they're more prestigious. It's the one that if you were to turn that prospect, everybody else would fall in line because they watch and they wait to see what that one will do. Well, see, that's somebody who ought to be important to you. Strategically, that is a reason it's representing a greater opportunity. So you would want to spend more time and more effort working to advance the sale with that one. We'd call that a top prospect. Not all leads are created equally, and not all prospects merit the same amount of investment, time and effort investment by you. So strategically, if you are thinking about what gets you to the ultimate goals that you're looking to get to, then you have to size up these opportunities and make these decisions based on more than a gut feeling, and certainly more than just what's easiest to do. Let me illustrate this another way. I'd like to use an extended metaphor to try to put this into a visual that maybe you could take away from this. Now, I'm going back a few years, but I remember my son and I once went apple picking with his best friend and the mom of the best friend. My son's friend at the time, my son was in kindergarten, and his friend was about 6 inches taller, and the mom was probably a full foot taller than me. But while we were picking apples, it very quickly became obvious that their basket was filling up a lot faster than ours, and they had some beautiful apples. In fact, they were eating apples as they picked, while we were just settling for apples that I'd already decided were destined to become applesauce. That's the best I could hope for. And pretty soon, my son figured this out. He said, all the ones I can reach are rotten, and he asked for a ladder. So we changed our tactics. He climbed the ladder, and I held my breath, fearful that he would reach too far or he might do something unsafe. And it turns out he was a little scared, too, and he just took it one step at a time. He was very cautious, and he was reminding me constantly to hold on to the ladder, as if I would ever let go. But once we overcame our fears and we got comfortable with this new approach, we did find some beautiful apples. Unfortunately, we didn't get too much time up there in that zone because our friends were already done and they were getting just a little impatient with us. But it's no different. It's no different at all when it comes to prospecting. See, most of us in sales, we spend a lot of time standing with our feet firmly planted on the ground. We're comfortable, complacent, avoiding risk, and relying on the low-hanging fruit. The problem is that this low-hanging fruit, it's often not the best. It might even be rotten. Sometimes we have to reach higher. We have to go outside our comfort zone. We have to pick new tactics and overcome our fears in order to go after the better fruit. But first, we have to come to grips with the fact that what's within reach isn't the best, that the prospects we're picking aren't the very best ones. They don't represent the best opportunities that we could be going after. One of the best clues, by the way, that a prospect isn't the best is simply this. You wonder if you should give up. Listen to that clue. That's a signal to analyze what you're doing. When we were apple picking, I sort of just accepted that those were the best apples available to us, and it was my son who refused to settle for those applesauce apples. He analyzed the situation when I did not. And sales is no different. You have to stop and think about the way you're spending your valuable time. Be strategic in how you prospect so that you invest your time wisely, and then make those investments. Choose to make investments that will pay off best for you. In other words, your effort should be equivalent to your opportunity. Your risk in reaching further should be justified by the potential payoff that you could be realizing. Now, effort equals opportunity. That also means that the size of the opportunity is determining how much effort you put into it. And to ascertain that size of opportunity, you'd have to be objective in assessing it. This equation works best when you can be objective. You can't limit yourself by looking only at that low-hanging fruit that seems to be in reach. You have to be willing to stretch and climb for the greater opportunities. And you have to be willing, this is really important, you have to be willing to put less effort, maybe even no effort, when the prospects are low opportunity or no opportunity. There is an exception to this rule, but it's very narrow, so please don't fall into the trap of overusing this exception. The exception is for people who have a very, very small number of prospects. They're restricted from increasing that prospect count by internal rules of engagement or by perhaps the category that they call on. And if you have a very finite, narrow category or account list, then you may not have the luxury of moving on in the way I'm describing. But chances are, for most of you, chances are that you do. So let's just focus on the majority as we continue here with this thought. But I want to be certain that I've emphasized the need to be rational and non-emotional when assessing your opportunity. Because with license to start crossing prospects off your list, you could get carried away. The feel-good rush of all those black lines crossing them out may take you too far too fast. So what do I mean by this? Emotionally, you may want to give up on prospects that you've already called 4 or 5 times and never gotten a reply from. But let me just say that 4 or 5 calls or emails is not nearly enough. Rationally, consider the opportunity. If this is a business you can help, one that will benefit from the products and services you sell, then the opportunity is probably worth a little more effort. And if this is a business that could spend a high dollar amount relative to your other accounts, then this is a potential opportunity worth a lot more effort. You see, opportunity, it's not measured by how easy the prospect is to reach. Those low-hanging apples, they were easy to reach, but they weren't even worth reaching. The minimal effort they required wasn't even worth that. The real opportunity when we went apple picking, it was high up, and the substantial effort was worth the opportunity to have perfectly formed, unscarred, juicy apples instead of the ones that were past their prime and they had scaly skin. The only merit about those apples was that they were easy to reach. So don't let frustration or fatigue influence your objective analysis of how much effort you should rationally invest in a good opportunity. And there are other emotional considerations here, right? Emotionally, you might want to abandon a prospect who is unpleasant to deal with. This would be the one who complains about your company, or they had a bad experience. They just like to watch you squirm, it seems like, or for whatever reason, they just don't appeal to you. But think twice before you subjectively eliminate that one from your list. Right? There are clues in that dynamic that you might need to mine so you can objectively assess the opportunity. Whatever the prospect is complaining about or objecting to, remember, that's a clue about what they value. And with a little more effort, perhaps you could deliver exactly what they value now that you have this insight. Consider, too, why are you uncomfortable? Maybe this prospect reminds you of some other customer you've had in the past. Think about that customer, the one in the past, and what it was that you did to turn that one around. Because the takeaway here, it's the same. Your emotional rationalizations, your reactions, the reasons that you'd think about dumping a prospect, they might not be as helpful to you as a fact-based, neutral assessment that starts with our formula. Effort equals opportunity. Now, I know emotionally there's this other piece. We all would like to dump those prospects in those moments when we feel minimized or rejected. In sales, feeling that way is not unusual, even for those who develop a thick skin and have a healthy resilience and are able to bounce back after hearing the word no. But when I ask sales reps to break down for me why some no's or some not nows bother them more than others, it always seems to be for personal reasons. And I'm not qualified to psychoanalyze what's going on there in those individual cases, but suffice it to say that the emotional feelings of rejection, the times when you personalize the no, those usually seem to be about something bigger than the no or about the lost sale. And this is why it's so important to stay level-headed and dispassionate and objective in your perspective to assess the opportunity presented by a prospect. There are some we don't really want to put the effort into because they just make us feel bad for a myriad of reasons. But those reasons, if you're strategically selling, those reasons won't dictate who you spend your time with. When I was new to sales, I had some favorite customers and some prospects, the ones who made me feel welcome, the ones I could chit-chat with all day long if I chose to. They didn't buy much, but they were always happy to see me. And in hindsight, I can see that I stopped by those businesses when I needed a little lift. Subconsciously, I must have known they would brighten my day, even though I knew I wasn't likely to make a sale. In other words, I was socializing, not selling. My emotions, not my objectivity, ruled in those moments. And because this was my practice for a couple of years in that first sales territory, I would guesstimate that the time spent on feeling good versus selling good added up to more than I'd probably care to admit. So to get away from making emotional decisions, and let's face it, if you have any say-so about when and who to call on when you're prospecting, you may let your emotions in the moment dictate who you're choosing to call. See, I've watched this process. A sales rep pulls up a list of contacts to be made today from the CRM, and then they start sort of an unscientific filtering process. And in field coaching, I ask, why'd you skip that one, or what caused you to go straight to that one? And the answers, they're almost always based in emotion. People say stuff like, well, this guy likes me. I think he's pretty close to buying. Or, yeah, I have a pretty good rapport with this contact. Or, I just call, who I'm kind of feeling like calling, whatever catches my attention. Well, you know what happens next. If we're being honest here, the time for prospecting fills up, and there are some prospects who don't get called at all. And when I ask people why they didn't call certain ones, again, it's about feelings. Something is in the way. So what I do and what I recommend for you is I ask sales reps to assign criteria, objective criteria with no names and no prospects in mind, just objectively criteria to distinguish between what is a good prospect and what's a bad prospect. These are objective, non-emotional criteria that signify there are truly good opportunities. Truly good opportunities, the ones that will help you to reach your goals and to be strategic. Okay, So remember, it's not about who takes the call. If it's a good prospect, you're going to put in more effort to break through, and you will do that when the opportunity warrants the effort. Okay, let's keep moving here because there are other questions that our formula, effort equals opportunity, can answer. Here's a good one. I hear it almost as often as the first one. Simply this: time and territory management. Right? If you're not connecting with a prospect, that may be a time and territory management issue, or it could have to do with other ways that you're spending your time. Are you spending your time selling? Because if you're not connecting with a prospect, there are only two choices. The first is that they aren't buying, and the second is that you're not selling. You're not choosing activities as you manage your time and territory that are sales activities. And I have to make a distinction. Making phone calls and dropping off business cards and leaving messages, that's not selling. Selling is persuading. And you can only persuade someone to do something when they see a clear benefit. Talking about your product and all its features, no matter how good they are, that will never, ever convey something relevant and meaningful to your buyer. Selling doesn't start until we start talking about the buyer, what the buyer wants to accomplish, what the buyer needs, and then, and only then, are you selling. So that means you have to sell the appointment with the buyer, individual buyer that is, in mind. And you can only sell your product or service if you have first sold the value of spending time with you. For this unique prospect at this point in time, why should they spend time with you? Generic pitches, they're not going to get that kind of a response. They're not going to get you through the door. You aren't managing your time and territory effectively. You aren't putting effort where the opportunity is, so long as you're relying on those generic tools and those tactics or actions, those behaviors that are rote. Okay, so if that's not you, if you are absolutely certain that you are selling, then the only other option is that this prospect is not buying. If they're not buying what you're selling, then the opportunity is very low, and the amount of effort you should put into this prospect at this time should also be very low. Now, one more clarification. When I say not buying, I don't mean not buying from you. I mean, if they're buying from your competitor, then they are buying. So that brings the opportunity level back up, and your amount of effort should rise in equal measure. And if, in fact, they are buying, then we're back to the other option. You're not selling in a way that is persuasive to this individual at this time. So try something different to be persuasive with that prospect. Put in the right amount of effort depending on how big that opportunity is. Okay, now all of this is relevant, but there are other time management implications here. If you're being strategic, you'd be finding that more of your day is spent proactively than reactively. See, the best sellers, the ones who are continually at the top of the leaderboard in their teams, they are very, very proactive. They choose to do the things that move their own strategies forward. They plan their days. They prioritize around their biggest opportunities. They don't let their minutes get depleted by fires that they have to put out or by all the distractions that come at them. And they don't ever procrastinate on what matters most. It is deliberately what they put front and center in each and every one of their days. And they know. They know what's going to serve them well strategically, and they understand the difference between serving the strategy and then all the other tactics that do or don't serve the strategy. So they make plans versus getting caught up in reactions and distractions. Now, the key word, if your question is, how do I manage my time and territory more effectively, the key word there is manage. This is part of that difference between selling and leading. Some of it's self-leadership. It's about being in control. It's about not letting yourself be a victim of circumstances. It's about mastering your time allocation and applying that time where the opportunity is greatest. So that's what you're aiming for if you're looking to have effort equals opportunity. be the formula for how you manage your time. So you might be asking, how then? What does it look like? How do I get there? How do I move from reactive to proactive? Let me define proactive a little bit more in detail and then give you some thoughts about how to get started. You see, being proactive, it means taking conscious control over everything in your life, certainly in the workplace and in your territory. It's about setting goals and working to achieve them. And it's not just about the goal, the amount of revenue you're supposed to bring in this month or this quarter or this period. It's about the interim goals. How do I get there? What are those steps that move me closer and closer toward it? And not just the interim goals, but the plan Bs, the contingency plans that you need. Proactive means you know the end point and you're figuring out all the ways to get there. And everything you do, all the time that you invest, serves that end goal. And you choose to put your effort into the opportunities that advance you toward that goal, not to be distracted by the ones that don't. So being proactive, it also means that instead of reacting to events and waiting around for opportunities to come your way, it means you go out and you create your own events and your own opportunities, and you put effort in to doing that, because no matter what, you're going to find a way to get to that goal. Being proactive means that instead of merely reacting to those events as they happen, that you are consciously engineering your own events. You are making things happen. That's what proactive's all about. So there are qualities, as with anything. If we keep peeling this back, there are qualities that will help you to be more proactive. And if you don't do this already in sales, chances are good that you have done this elsewhere in your life. So these aren't about new skills. It's not about changing who you are. It's about cross-applying what you've done so well in other parts of your life and bringing those in, making those choices as you sell. People who are proactive, the times when they are proactive, they are very self-aware and self-controlled. They are able to separate the workplace stimuli, for example, all those distractions, from their own responses. You know, you don't have to respond every time an email pops up, or every time the phone rings, every time somebody around you starts a different conversation. You, even in sales, although you want to be responsive, you can choose how and when to respond. And people who are proactive, they have that strategy. They're grounded in that strategy. They know where they want to get, and they use all of that as a guide for the decisions that they make. You have a choice all the time. Should I do A or B? Which one is going to serve my strategy? Should I put my effort into A or B, because which one gives me the greatest opportunity to get where I want to go? And to be proactive, you do have to be a bit nimble. You have to be creative and imagine the alternative solutions. Visualize them. Don't give up at the first disappointment. Instead, find the way around it. Don't let a barrier be a true obstacle. Let it just be a temporary detour that you need to take. And all of that, everything I'm describing, I understand it requires being courageous. What in sales doesn't require a little bit of courage? You have to be independent, right? Choosing your own unique response, doing things differently, sometimes breaking the mold, because getting to your goal might require you to do things differently. Maybe it's not the same way you did them last month. Maybe it's not the same way that other people in your organization are selling. Maybe even it's not the way your sales manager has done it in the past. Sales, like leadership, is all about finding your own way, about being authentic and making sure that what you do works for you. So it's important to go ahead and clear the path ahead of yourself in whatever way necessary. Now, I have a couple of additional things that E equals O, our formula works for, and this next one's a delicate subject. You know, I'm an advocate for salespeople, and I have to say, I think it's time for a reality check. I'm actually getting a little annoyed. All these CRM companies out there, you hear one thing from them over and over again. They say the only problem with their system is user adoption rate. And guess what? If there was value in using that CRM, there would not be a problem with the user adoption rate. So sales managers, this is a question for you. Is the effort and time spent by your sellers worth the lost selling time? Is there enough opportunity realized to justify the investment of time and the lost selling time? Is your CRM giving you what you need so much to the extent that it's worth whatever you're asking your sellers to do to feed that CRM? And the answer may be yes. If it is, I applaud you. Sellers, I have a question for you too. Do you know what the opportunity actually is with your CRM? Be sure you're not rejecting it too quickly. Maybe it can do more for you than you realize. So give it a fair shot. But for everybody in the organization, sellers and sales managers alike, please remember that effort equals opportunity when it comes to tools. I'm talking about all those sales enablement tools. I'm talking about the research reported by ClearSlide, the 4 reasons why it's time to reboot technology. That research that told us that on average, salespeople spend less than 35% of their time actually selling. That concerns me. It concerns me because you are throwing a lot of money at sales enablement. And all these things we label as sales enablers, that would be all the tech resources, it would be the tools, the systems, the processes, the sales training, the sales coaching, the sales meetings, things that you're doing to try to make sales easier. Well, here's a moment of truth. How many of those actually take away so much time from selling that they are not sales enablers? Maybe they had the potential to be, but remember, every one of them also can potentially become a disabler of sales if not used thoughtfully and in a way that is balanced enough to allow for adequate selling time. If it's not in balance, then sales time is eroded, hence that statistic that only about 35% of a salesperson's time is spent on selling. Effort has to equal opportunity. Evaluate where the salesperson's time is going and whether or not that time spent is yielding a return in sales made. If not, you're asking for an effort in places where there isn't a sales opportunity. Is that what you really want to be doing? 4th question. Effort equals opportunity also applies here. I hear this a lot from salespeople. How much should I be putting into my proposal? And I see proposals getting bigger, not smaller. When they're printed out, it looks like we're going for flop factor, these great big stacks of paper that literally, when they go down on the desk, they make the sound flop. Or if it's a slide, it just looks like there are so many slides that maybe you can spend 5 to 10 seconds on each, but more and more salespeople seem to not be getting through their slides because of it. Yeah, more slides do not equal more impressive. More slides don't equal more sales. More slides only equal one thing that I can say is in common. More slides typically equal more information about you and your company. And those slides are typically marketing collateral, so I understand why they're tempting to use. Each slide all by itself says something that's pretty cool. It's pretty impressive. But when you string them all together, you just send your prospect into the drone zone. Nobody's going to listen to all that information, and I don't care how good the slides look or how compelling the factoids are. Nobody, when you string it all together, can possibly stay tuned and understand what it is you're trying to tell them, because it's all about you. Now, let's say you customize, and you are doing a high level of customization in your proposals. Well, there's time required for that. It takes time to prepare these, and then it takes time to present them. The more customized and the more content that there is, the longer they take to present. And the more you're doing with each and every presentation, the more turnaround time there usually is too. And every single day that goes by between needs assessment and green light to propose something, and then the time you actually propose it, every day that goes by is dampening your prospect's interest and leaving the door open to your competition. Effort equals opportunity means that sometimes you might have a one-call close with no proposal. And I'm not talking to enterprise-wide sales here and very complex sales. I understand you'll almost always have to have an extensive proposal. But in general, effort equals opportunity. Many salespeople have opportunities to close without going back to the office and crafting a formal proposal. If you know in that moment exactly what the solution should be, and let's say it's something that's small, the opportunity isn't a big one, well, maybe you don't need to expend the effort to create an entirely crafted proposal. Use that if it applies for you. Effort equals opportunity says that sometimes proposals will be short, simple, and to the point. Some will be customized with one or two really good slides or pages. Some will be, effort equals opportunity says that every slide you use will have some customization. But by and large, fewer, faster, shorter, that's what I'm giving you permission to do. If the opportunity isn't so big, your effort shouldn't be so big either. And here's one more thought for you. People say to me, why should I go to sales training? I'm a sales trainer, so my answer might surprise you. I'm not sure you should go to sales training. Is it right for you? Is the content of the particular sales training coming up relevant? Will you learn something new that can truly improve your sales effectiveness? By investing that amount of time in that training, how much money will you lose in sales, and how much ROI will you need to make so that that training time was worthwhile? And I would say this applies to all learning activities and meetings. But don't misunderstand me. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card because we all have something to learn. But strategically, what is it that you're focusing on? To support that strategy, what do you need to learn? What resources do you need to access? Be smart about this. Effort equals opportunity. Where is your greatest opportunity? Your opportunity to get more sales, your opportunity to reach your goals, and your opportunity to get the information, the resources, the know-how, the training, and the tools that will serve you best in your own strategy. So these are the kinds of ways that you would apply this formula, this effort equals opportunity formula. And it's simple, and it works best if you make it your mantra. If you will ask yourself every day with each choice that you make, how much effort should I put in? Well, first I need to analyze the opportunity, and that will answer the question for you. Now remember, my invitation at the beginning was that you send me your questions, give me your feedback. I would love to have offline conversations with some of you who have very, very specific questions. And I'd welcome you to try this formula and give me some feedback about how it works for you too. Please don't forget that there are some resources attached to this Bright Talk. They will help you to be more strategic. One of the resources I've attached is the first chapter of the book, Discover Questions, Get You Connected, because this is what it's all about. It's all about being more strategic in the way that you sell and in how you drive sales productivity inside your organization. That book is also a workshop. If you're interested in more information, please don't hesitate to contact me. I work as a sales coach and as a sales trainer, and I believe it's my duty to help you as a sales manager or you as a salesperson to find ways that you can authentically sell and advance every sale and connect with your buyers so that you and your buyers can reach your goals. I appreciate you attending this particular Bright Talk. I hope you'll find great value in using the formula, effort equals opportunity. Please share this with your friends and colleagues and connect with me on social media. Thank you for your time today.